Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajaka Stotara Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajaka Stotara Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Jayo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Radhikadara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Ki Jai Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol Shamaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All the glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaivam narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudidayat nasva prayeshu aparadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utamashloker bhaktir bhavati naistiki. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 26th chapter, 63 to 71 chapters. We'll start with text number 62. Ete, he, ete, he. Avyuhita, Deva, Naivas, Yotupane, Sakan, Punar, Avivishu, Kani, Tam, Atapaitam, Kamad, Ete Avyutita Deva, Navasya Uttapane Sakam Punaravi Vishushani Tamupaya Titam Kramat Eteya Vuyutita Deva Naivasyo Tapane Sakam Punaravi Vishat Kanai Tamutapaitam Kumat Navasyastapane Sakam Punaravi Shitekani Paitum Kamat Eteya Bhuttita Seva Navasya Tapane Kaham Punaravishisakana Tamutapaitam Kama Eteya Viyutita Seva Nivasyo Tapane Sakam Punaravi Vishukani Tamutapaitam Kama. Ladies, Eteya Bhuttita Deva Navasya Tapanasikam Punaravishisakani Tamutapaitam Kama Eteya Bhuttita Deva Navasyo Tapane Sakam Punaravishisukani Tamutayatitam Kama. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. When the demigods and presiding deities of the various senses were thus manifested, they wanted to wake their origin of appearance. But upon failing to do so, they re-entered the body of the Virat Purusha one after another in order to wake him responsively. When the demigods and presiding deities of the various senses were thus manifested, they wanted to wake their origins of appearance. But upon failing to do so, they re-entered the body of the Virat Purusha one after another in order to wake him. Purport: in order to wake the sleeping deity controller within, one has to rechannel the sense activities from concentration on the outside to concentration inside. In the following verses, the sense activities which are required to wake the Virat Purusha will be explained very nicely. So I'll read just the texts of some of the following verses. Text 63. The god of fire entered his mouth with the organ of speech, but the Virat Purusha could not be aroused. Then the god of wind entered his nostrils with the sense of smell, but still the Virat Purusha refused to be awakened. Text 64. The sun god entered the eyes of the Virat Purusha with the sense of sight, but still the Virat Purusha did not get up. Similarly, the predominating deities of the directions entered through his ears with the sense of hearing, but still he did not get up. Text 65. The predominating deities of the skin, herbs, and seasoning plants entered the skin of the Virat Purusha with the air of the body. but the cosmic being refused to get up even then. The God predominating over water entered his organ of generation with the faculty of procreation, but the Virat Purusha still would not rise. Text 66. The God of death entered his anus with the organ of defecation, but the Virat Purusha could not be spurred to activity. The God Indra entered the hands with their power of grasping and dropping things, but the Virat Purusha would not get up even then. Text 67. Lord Vishnu entered his feet with the faculty of locomotion, but the Virat Purusha refused to stand up even then. The rivers entered his blood vessels with the blood and the power of circulation, but still the cosmic being could not be made to stir. Text 68. The ocean entered his abdomen with hunger and thirst, but the cosmic being refused to rise even then. The moon god entered his heart with the mind, but the cosmic being would not be moved. Text 69. Brahma also entered the heart with intelligence, but even then the cosmic being could not be prevailed upon to get up. Lord Rudra also entered his heart with the ego, but even then the cosmic being did not stir. Text 70. However, when the inner controller, the deity presiding over consciousness, entered the heart with reason, at that very moment the cosmic being arose from the causal waters. Text 71. When a man is sleeping, all his material assets, namely the vital energy, the senses for recording knowledge, the senses for working, the mind and the intelligence, cannot arouse him. He can be aroused only when the super soul helps him. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The expansion of Sankhya philosophy is described here in detail, in the sense that the Virat Purusha, or the universal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the original source of all various sense organs and their presiding deities. The relationship between the Virat Purusha and the presiding deities or their living entities is so intricate that simply by exercising the sense organs which are related to their presiding deities, the Virat Purusha cannot be aroused. It is not possible to arouse the Virat Purusha or to link with the Supreme Absolute Personality of Godhead by material activities. Only by devotional service and detachment can one perform the process of linking with the Absolute. Om Agena Temarandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Swaparantikam. Prabhupada has set a very high standard, sort of an ideal to reach for. When Italian painters learned from the grand masters like Leonardo and Michelangelo, they knew that most of them would never achieve that level of perfection. But nonetheless, they copied them. It's a sort of a form of plagiarism, you might say, by way of learning. And sometimes it is said that people who wish to write can appreciate other writers like William Shakespeare or F. Scott Fitzgerald or even Dan Brown or Stephen King, and they should attempt to write in their own style right after reading those things. So in a sense, that is a way of plagiarism, but in actual fact, plagiarism is stealing and claiming something to be one's own that is not one's own. So it's not exactly that way. And Prabhupada is indicating here that the Virat Purusha could not be aroused by material activities, only by devotional service. And he has said in many places that the material world is it's not real. It's real but temporary. It's sort of like a dream, but it's a realistic dream. And sometimes when we dream, we awaken, and if it's a very realistic dream, we thought it was actually reality. But sometimes we are very fooled. So the books can give us the same thing. They're absolute, and they're at a high platform, and they're a paragon of virtue. But we can't always follow everything. I think Prabhupada is on record of saying that he was 80% lenient. And sometimes he even asked, after initiation, he asked devotees to chant more than 16 rounds. So even though he was setting a very high standard, it could not be followed by everyone. And it's sometimes very difficult to understand things that are written down in Shastras or in the Bhagavad Gita. I'm going to read one of the verses that's very puzzling to many people. It's in the 18th chapter, the 47th verse, and it says, "It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reaction." So before I read the purport to this verse, I want to say that there's some very common examples. For example, if we don't know how to drive an automobile, but we get in and start driving, it could be very dangerous. People could be killed. And if we don't know how to operate a very complex machine like an excavator or a cherry picker, it can result in disaster. So there are very stringent rules and licensing rules about how to drive a car and how to drive heavy machinery. So in the purport to this verse, I'll read the verse again. It is better to engage one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. Of course, although some people advocate the need to establish our varnas, and it works for some people who are very expert in some fields, but Prabhupada also said that there should be a Varnashram college, a training facility, so that you can become a perfect Brahmin, so that you become a perfect Kshatriya, so that you become a perfect Vaishya and a perfect Sudra. So this is what Prabhupada wrote in the purport to this verse. One's occupational duty, again, some things of what I'm going to express are only my own opinions. They're not absolute, and a lot of things that the Prabhupada said are not always true in all conditions, to all audiences, in all places. And sometimes they vary. It would depend on who is hearing the conversation in the room, who is the recipient of the letter, who is on the morning walk, and sometimes even where a lecture was being given. So this is Prabhupada's purport. One's occupational duty is prescribed in Bhagavad Gita. As already discussed in previous verses, the duties of a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra are prescribed according to their particular modes of nature. One should not imitate another's duty. A man who is by nature attracted to the kind of work done by Sudras should not artificially claim to be a Brahmin, although he may have been born into a Brahmin family. In this way, one should work according to his own nature. No work is abominable. If performed in the service of the Supreme Lord, it is not abominable. The occupational duty of a Brahmin is certainly in the mode of goodness. But if a person is not by nature in the mode of goodness, he should not imitate the occupational duty of a Brahmin. I'm just going to segue for a moment into another example Prabhupada once gave, that a man was once cutting a piece of wood it turned out that the weather was so hot and so oppressively hot in that room that he left this log that he was cutting. He was a construction engineer of sorts, and put a wedge in it so that he would come back the next day and take up where he left off. But somehow or other, a monkey, probably one of those mischievous ones, I think they're called rhesus monkeys, in Vrindavan, got into the house and started looking at this log and the wedge and was wondering what it was. And he started to handle the wedge. And unnoticed by him, he lifted the wedge up, and his tail was, and the log snapped together, and his tail was caught in the log, and he was found dead because he couldn't go anywhere. He was stuck, and he was found to have died the next morning when the worker came to work. So I can continue the purport. For a Kshatriya or administrator, there are so many abominable kinds of diplomacy. Such violence and duplicity accompany political affairs, but a Kshatriya is not surprised to give up his occupational duty and try to perform the duties of a Brahmin. One should act to satisfy the Supreme Lord. For example, Arjuna was a Kshatriya. He was hesitating to fight with the other party. But if such fighting is performed for the sake of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there need be no fear of degradation. In the business field also, sometimes a merchant has to tell so many lies to make a profit. If he does not do so, then there can be no profit. Sometimes a merchant says, quote, "Oh, my dear customer, for you I am making no profit," close quote. But one should know that without profit, the merchant cannot exist. Therefore, it should be taken as a simple lie if a merchant says that he is not making a profit. Another example was that one morning, Prabhupada was on his walk with a gentleman named Dr. Patel. The conversations with Prabhupada and Dr. Patel are well documented and repeated throughout the database. And he was, as far as I know, this doctor was never initiated. He was a medical doctor. Was never initiated by Prabhupada, but they had some very lively debates. And this man was very schooled and knew a lot of Sanskrit shlokas by memory in the Sanskrit language. So on one occasion he was saying that he thought that the Jewish people were the best race of people in the world. And he pointed out some of the devotees, some of the early devotees that were of that faith. And I won't mention them, you probably know who they were. And he went on about it and talked about a lot of historical famous Jewish people. And at one point, I think Prabhupada was schooled in the Scottish Churches College. So he knew some of the plays of William Shakespeare. And there was one called The Merchant of Venice. The Merchant of Venice was a guy named Shylock, who was a money lender and a sort of archetypal Jew with a big nose and a very greedy mentality. And so in the middle of this conversation, Prabhupada said, "Well, Shylock?" Something like that. And that was the end of the conversation, because everyone knew that Shylock was not a highly elevated individual. Anyway, that was the end of that conversation, that part of that conversation. If such a fighting is performed for the sake of Krishna, the Supreme Personality tells so many lies to make a profit. If he does not do so, there can be no profit. Sometimes the merchant says, "Oh, my dear customer, for you I am making no profit." But one should know that without profit, the merchant cannot exist. Sometimes Prabhupada says things that appear to be contradictory, even in his own books. They appear to be contradictory. And people take something that was said in a purport out of context and sometimes think that it is always true in all times, in all places, for all people. And because he says very opposing things, it's not always the case. Therefore, it should be taken as a simple lie that if a merchant says that he is not making a profit, and lying is considered to be offensive. A Brahmin is not allowed to tell lies. One of the qualities of a Brahmin is he is always truthful. He's even truthful to his own enemies, such that even his own enemy feels when he comes into a Brahmin's presence that he is very welcome. And I think Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati is on record of saying that I want nothing but the highest good for my worst enemy. So that's something that Prabhupada did say, and we've heard it said many times by the acharyas. But the merchant should not think that because he is engaged in an occupation in which the telling of lies is compulsory, he should give up his profession and pursue the profession of a Brahmin. That is not recommended. Whether one is a Kshatriya, a Vaishya, or a Sudra doesn't matter. If he serves by his work the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even Brahmins who perform different types of sacrifice sometimes must kill animals, because sometimes animals are sacrificed in such ceremonies. Similarly, if a Kshatriya engaged in his own occupation kills an enemy, there is no sin incurred. In the 3rd chapter, these matters have been clearly and elaborately explained. Every man should work for the purpose of yajna, or for Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anything done for personal sense gratification is a cause of bondage. The conclusion is that everyone should be engaged according to the particular mode of nature he has acquired. He should decide to work only to serve the supreme cause of the Supreme Lord. That's the end of the purport. And Prabhupada is on record of saying that only half of his work has been completed. The other half would be to establish what he called Varnashram Dharma. And there are some people who even in classes would say that I am a Brahmin, I am a Kshatriya, I am a Sudra. And in some cases, probably it was true. But in one class, the class giver asked everyone to realize and to come to the conclusion that Varnashram Dharma be established immediately, even though Prabhupada on another occasion said that there should be something as a Varnashram college in which people can be trained how to be a proper this or that, a Brahmin or a Kshatriya or whatever. It's interesting that it's even recorded that Maharaj Pariksit, when he saw someone abusing an animal, that he drew his sword. So we didn't see the conclusion exactly in the Bhagavatam as to what happened to this person who was abusing the animal. But there are many instances that seem contradictory. In one place, it's said that lying is a bad thing. It's only the province of a Brahmin that he can be. He has to be always truthful, even amongst people who dislike him. And in other places, like this one in this purport, that Prabhupada said that it's absolutely necessary for telling lies. Otherwise, a merchant can make no profit. So these are some of the contradictory things that do appear. And sometimes we have to use our intelligence and we have to think clearly in order to find out what is true and what is false, and how to act and how not to act. So these are some of the things that are talked about. And this is one way of explaining what this verse is, and we have a saying in the English language that you shouldn't monkey around with something, or that's monkey business. And that's kind of the example that Prabhupada used about the monkey coming in to take the wedge out of the log, and it ended up killing him. So that's what we mean by these kind of informal terms like monkey business and mischievousness, and we've experienced, and it's a very common thing that some of the types of breeds of monkeys are very mischievous. They steal things, they take things that aren't theirs, they break things, they spoil things that are set up in a nice way. and they have to be chased away. I've had experience with this myself, and I find that they're very afraid if you carry a stick. It's a good thing to do if you're in a place where there's mischievous monkeys that are out to steal and do mischief. So are there any comments or questions about any of this or anything at all? Yes?
Thank you, Maharaj. You're talking about devotees should be truthful. My question is, what is white lie? And our devotees can say white lie up to what extent?
Well, if we carefully read what Prabhupada wrote, there are instances in which lying is not only permissible but required. But that's not necessarily recommended for everyone. That's just what I read, and it's written down in the Bhagavad Gita. Doesn't mean that it's always true at all times for everyone in all places.
So what is white lie?
Sorry, what is
What
white
is
lie?
white lie?
Something like that. Something like a white lie. Oh, what is a white lie? Well, we might say that I'm making no profit is a white lie.
A devotee is, up to what extent? Who can say white lie and who cannot say white lie?
Well, they're edging on to something that's controversial, and I would choose not to say anything to that in response to that, because everything that I'm saying is being recorded. So if you want to discuss this with me, you can do it after class in a place where there's no microphones and no TV cameras. Thank you. And they're all over. It's very hard to find such a place nowadays. Anything else that can be discussed openly and be recorded?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. This Virat Purush that's being talked about with all the senses and what have you, where does that exist?
What?
This Virat Purush that's being talked about. So where does it exist?
It's said that the Virat Purusha is not actually real. That it's a kind of a specter almost. When Krishna saw the Virat Purusha, Prabhupada said that it was not shown to anyone else. So it's a way for people to understand that without Krishna's sanction, nothing can happen. And so it's not necessarily understood as being something that we can touch, feel, and hear, but there's a purpose for this type of simile or metaphor of existence for people that haven't really accomplished the final knowledge of Krishna consciousness. And Arjuna was very dismissive of this. He said that he wanted this form to disappear, and that he wanted to see the Krishna that he could talk with and that he could relate with, and who was his friend and relative. So it's a kind of, like with a specter, it's sort of a thing that, it's a kind of figment of imagination. It exists in real time, but in another way it doesn't exist. It's kind of like a dream. We can dream something, and maybe it's not true, but we think it's true.
I mean, when Krishna showed the form to Arjuna, his hair was standing on end in fear and things, so he was definitely seeing something, wasn't he? Like experiencing something.
Sometimes when we have dreams, our hair stand on end, or we can do all kinds of things can happen because we think that it's real, but it's not real. It's just ultimately a figment or a figment of imagination. And Prabhupada says that the material world is actually like that. That what we think is real is real, but it's like a dream. It's temporary. It goes away. And we think that whatever happens in this lifetime is going to be forever. But great people have realized that it's not forever. It's just a flickering batting of an eyelid in the grand sweep of time. This 100 years is nothing. It's just an instant. So, any other non-controversial types of questions? Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. In ISKCON, do we have any of these Varnashram colleges that are...
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, there are probably some. But why do you want to?
No, I can't
enroll?
do something like that. But yeah, I would like to enroll.
Maybe Praladananda knows about it. He's more of a seasoned traveler than I am. Do you know anything about a Varnashram college existing?
We have a sannyasi college where the sannyas college candidates come to learn how to become a sannyasi.
Yeah.
We've had that for many years now. And we have so many colleges to teach devotees how to become managers. We have the GBC college for that. We have the Brahmin college, Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhava, Bhakti Sarvabhauma. So there's training going on. And
yeah, you can take a lot of these courses and learn how to be a Brahmin, for example. And as Maharaj has mentioned, there's many other schools of knowledge, and it's underway. So Prabhupada's dream is coming true. Even though it may take some time to fully manifest, it's still existing.
And every morning we have a Bhagavatam class.
Pardon?
Every morning we have a Bhagavatam class.
And that's another cherished dream that is still coming true. And the fact that Seven Berry Place and was purchased, the whole building, and that the floor of the 26th 2nd Avenue is being used as a temple and a museum, that's part of Prabhupada's dream coming true. Hare Krishna. So I think we have time for maybe one more.
Maharaj, I was just going to say, eventually we just get the permission to establish a university in Vrindavan, that Bhaktivedanta Swami International Gurukul School has another section where there will be a university of Ayurveda, astrology, and also, yes, Varnashram College, eventually. The government gave us grant and also permission.
So to give some idea of expertise in Vaishnavism, I heard a story, not by Prabhupada, but it's about something that Prabhupada told. It was told by one of his followers or disciples that a man, a Vaishya, had become very wealthy. And somehow or other, by a warp of fate, he lost all of his wealth. So he went to a Brahmin and asked him how he could regain his former stature of being a wealthy man. And it was at that time, I don't know when it happened exactly, but this is the story that Prabhupada tells. There was a plague in India, and the plague was transmitted by rats. You've probably heard this. Maharaj is nodding. And he said, if you get that rat out in the street and give it to the government, they will give you some money. And if you invest that money very carefully, you will regain all your wealth. And he did exactly what the Brahmin asked him to do. He got the rat, he got the money, he invested it, and he started selling oil. And then he got some money from that, and he invested that. And after a while, he became a very wealthy man again. He was a true blue Vaishya. So being a Vaishya is not an ordinary thing. To go from abject poverty to wealth is only the province of people who are highly schooled or highly intelligent about being a Vaishya. So that's kind of what these colleges are for. They're to train us to be perfect Vaishyas, perfect Brahmins or whatever, and perfect in knowledge. So these are some of the instances of what the school will teach in higher levels. Or the college, Varnashram College. So I think... Sorry? One more.
Thank you for class, Maharaj. Yesterday verse, there was false ego mentioned, as a being sickest layer of this material universe. And I was wondering, because although we perform devotional service to dissolve our false ego, but sometimes it happens that we, as a result, we boost our false ego. So how do we know that we are actually purifying our false ego as a result of devotional service?
It's difficult to know. There was one person I used to know who was very successful in his particular occupation, and he asked all his employees 2 questions. He said, "What do you like to do best, and what are you best at doing?" And he had a very successful organization and very successful employees who followed those principles, and he engaged them according to those principles. But it's very rare. I mean, I can say that I'm a Brahmin, I'm a Kshatriya, I'm a Shudra, I'm a this or I'm a that. But nowadays, everybody does a little bit of everything. We have Brahmins who are doing machine work, and machinists who are doing Brahminical work. So it's a very, I don't think we're ready yet. I mean, that's my personal opinion. I don't think that the Varnas, even though people teach it, and I think it's an ideal that's worth striving for, but it's, I think, a time away. That's my opinion. When it was brought forth at an annual GBC meeting, from what I understand, the question was discussed briefly. What is Varnashram Dharma? What is Daivi Varnashram Dharma? What is the existing Varnashram principle that exists today? That is a kind of a reflection, you might say, of Varnashram. There are people who are specialized in Brahminical things. There are people who specialize in as a worker. But it's time. That's my thought, that it's a time away. But it's underway. I think that's all we have time for. One more, maybe.
Guru Maharaj, so if we're following our nature in devotional service, then naturally our false ego becomes purified?
If we follow our nature in
devotional service,
I think so.
Then naturally, eventually?
I think so. I mean, she was asking if we do what we love to do in devotional service, will we get eventually purified? And I think so. I mean, that's what most of us do. We're trying to get purified, but it may take a few lifetimes, or maybe many lifetimes, or many millions of years, or it can happen tomorrow, depending on Krishna, what he wants. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.